What is going on, my fellow nerds? OperatorOtter here, and today what I'd like to discuss is the Necromancer changes that are coming for Season 3 in Diablo 4. The patch notes have dropped. I go to work really late, and I get home very early in the morning, so I just woke up, and I read all the patch notes, and I want to go over this quickly to get that content out to you so that you know what's going on for Necromancers. We're going to be covering up the really important things. I'm not going to cover every single thing, but I will be talking quite fast to keep this video under 10 minutes, so any of you that are non-native English speakers, make sure to slow the video down to understand what I'm saying. So let's just get through it fast and talk about it. So essentially the big first one is going to be Ring of Starless Skies. So previously it was a core skill that you had to cast that would reduce your core skills cost by 12 to 40%. So that meant that you had to cast 4 core skills to get this maximum 40%, and then it resets upon any using non-core skill. This was really like anti-synergistic with a lot of things that are happening with Necromancer, because Necromancer, the way that it works is that you're actually using a lot of other skills to empower your main skill. So anything like an Evade for the Metamorphosis, Decrepify, Corpse Explosion, Blood Mist, Bone Storm, any of that stuff that you cast, it would just reset this. And so therefore Ring of Starless Skies is kind of like bleh. But now what's happening is spending resource reduces your resource cost and increases your damage by 10% up to 40%. This is not just core skills, this is literally everything. And so what this means is that this is just Season of the Bone Necro. Because with Bone Spear, what this is going to do is it's going to reduce the cost of Bone Spear from 19 down to about 11 to 12, which is absolutely insane in tandem with the combination with the Ossified Essence key passive. So this is just going to be nutty. It's also going to give us 40% bonus damage multiplicatively. And what that means is that we're actually going to dip into a multiplier that's equal to Flesh Eater without having to actually have Flesh Eater active. So because of this one ring, we're actually going to be able to deal so much more damage because of the resource cost reduction. But at the same time, we're also going to be able to have Flesh Eater active pretty much the entire event that we're going through, the entire activity that we're going through, because of the way that it's functioning. So Bone Spear is just like absolutely ridiculous now. There are going to be ways that we're actually going to dip into Flesh Eater that are going to be a bit different now if the Sacrilegious Ring is not going to be part of Season of the Construct. I don't know if it is or not. There hasn't really been like any talk about that. If it is, then the black there are going to be problems that we're going to discuss about like how we're going to build this. But we run into problems if we're going to run Black River Miasma with that. And I think there's going to be actually a different way to do this. We're going to be able to dip into Flesh Eater to burst like high health elites and high health bosses. So that will be a video coming out about that. Moving down, we're going to just skip on down to the Necromancer changes here. Like I said, the overpowered changes that they're making are so drastic that basically anything that's a blood necro for overpower is just dead in the water. I don't know if this is really going to make up for those changes, but the fact that it's making up for those changes and not buffing it means that overpowered blood necros are still kind of like the. Moving down, we have Shattered Spirit's Outfits. This is the new item. Casting Bone Spirit also launches 18 bone splinters in all directions, dealing 2 to 400% increased damage and generating 6 essence per hit. This part right here, where we're dealing increased damage with the bone splinters, isn't going to really be all that important unless you're doing like really low content, because bone splinters doesn't really do all that much damage, and increasing it by a multiplier of 5 means that it's going to deal up to maybe like 2 to 300k damage, which is going to be good for low tier stuff. But when you start getting to like tier 100s or you start doing Gauntlet, it's not really going to make that big of a difference. But this generating 6 essence per enemy per hit is going to be a big change, and the reason being is it's going to synergize with this one down here, the Dreadful New Bone Spirit, that is going to increase 30% or restore 30% of your maximum essence instead of a flat 30%. So what that means is that as you're running like 300 maximum essence, just casting your Bone Spirit, you're going to restore 30% of your max essence up to 100. And then with this Bone Splinters, realistically, only half of them are actually going to hit enemies because of the way that the game is. So because of that, you're going to gain 54 essence from those hitting out. And I also don't know if it's going to synergize, again, with the fact that Bone Splinters actually just does give you essence back on hit. So I don't know if it's going to be 7 plus 6 or it's just going to be 6 by itself. But if it's 7 plus 6, casting Bone Spirit is basically just going to restore from like 300 back to like 200. If it's not, it's going to be 300 down, 300 to 150. And so you can kind of just like permanently cast your Bone Spirit at 50% efficiency, which is going to be really, really good. Moving down, the lucky hit chance reduced from 40 to 25%. This is a huge nerf to Pentadot Necros and to Infamous Necros, because essentially what was happening was that it was a lucky hit chance based build, and the way that you were proccing this lucky hit chance was through the Blighted Corpse Explosion. It would deal damage about 5 to 6 times per second, and it was a 40% lucky hit chance proc every single time it hit. So this is what was proccing X-Falls a lot. The fact that it's being reduced down to 25% is basically just saying that X-Falls is going to proc 40% less of the time. Like, it's just going to proc 40% less often, which is basically a 40% damage nerf to X-Falls because it's just happening less often. And so because of that, Infinimist and Pentadot Necros have kind of gotten nerfed with that. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad build. It's still going to be a very strong, probably even S tier build, but it's definitely not going to be the build because of this nerf right here. The base damage increase from 50 to 70%. That means that you're going to have these builds that are going to utilize the Plagued Corpse Explosion using the Exhumation glyph. Is going to be pretty cool for like things in Helltide, because the corpse explosions are going to detonate with Black River and are going to be huge and just cover the whole screen, and it's like super satisfying to like cast one ability and then like the corpse explosion goes off and just kills everything. It's super fun. It's super fast. I'm very excited to see how that one's going to function. The corpse explosion damage being nerfed is decent. It's another nerf to Pentadot Infamous because those dots were dealing quite a bit of damage per tick. So the fact that nerfing that is going to be one thing. Blight, don't care. Sever is like whatever. There was a Sever Shadow build in Season 2, but the reason that Sever was strong was because it was dipping into the damage or the defense utility of Shadow. Increasing its damage is nice, but it's only going to be utilized if the damage that we're receiving from the gauntlet is going to be high enough to where we actually need the defense. Now Sever is going to actually be a thing. For the most part, Sever is just kind of going to be that nice like B, A tier kind of build type of thing. Bone Spirit increased 4% per essence instead of 3%. It's just a nice like 33% damage bonus to Bone Spirit, which is going to be pretty sick. So Bone Spirit's getting even more. We already talked about that. The Decompose changes, that's really going to be only thing for like dot builds that utilize like Corpse Explosion or utilizing the corpses to do anything, which is Corpse Explosion. So if you're ever in a scenario where Infinimist or Pentadot have to cast Decompose to generate corpses because of the nerf that's happening with this lucky hit chance to actually proc Hewed Flesh, then you're in a bad spot. So I don't really see this like being utilized all that often. And if it is, that means like we're really in a bad spot. Dreadful Blood Mist changing from the Fortify amount to the 10% critical hit strike amount. This is just another bonus to a Bone Spear build that I have in the making. That's going to utilize this, and it's going to be really ridiculous. Bone Spirit isn't going to really utilize this because Bone Spirit is going to have that 100% crit chance already with the new aspect. So it's not like woo for that. But for Bone Spear, this is a pretty big buff. And I will explain why in the new build video that I'm having out, because there's going to be a synergy that's going to happen with Blood Mist that's going to really make all of our multipliers go insane. The Bone Prison changes are like, they are what they are. I loved Bone Prison for being able to troll my friends when we were leveling up just because it's hilarious. But this is a good change for the late game for Summoner Necro going forward. Being able to gain essence, this is going to be a thing for like Bone Spirit again. If you're ever in a scenario where you're not able to kill the enemy in the first Bone Spirit cast, then casting Bone Prison to get that other essence back, then casting Bone Spirit again is going to be really nice. The Dreadful Bone Spirit being able to reduce your active cooldowns, this is going to basically synergize into Bone Spirit again, because when you crit, you go from 12 seconds to a 5-second cooldown, and then with your natural cooldown reduction, it'll go down to about 4 seconds. And then if you're able to actually get 6 enemies within your Bone Prison, then you can get up to a 0 to 1 second cooldown, which means you can double cast your Bone Spirit really fast and kind of do this burst 1-2 punch and kill him. Ossified now being displayed is very nice. The Book of the Dead changes, there's nothing here that's like woo. But it's gonna be, they're decent little changes for Summoner Necros, but Summoner Necros need like a lot of buffs. Like, not these little buffs that are happening are like but they're a step in the right direction, but like we need a lot more than that for Summoner Necros to be worth anything. Your minions getting 10% increased damage for every 20% of attack speed bonus they have. So there's things like Keelix Edict can give 30% if you don't receive damage. They just gain 15% flat if you have each of the minion types active, which is nice. If you haven't taken damage in 2 seconds, they get 30%, which is pretty cool. So that's going to give them 15% damage on their own. There's also that aspect that gives 100% increased attack speed, but there's some bugs that are going on with that. If you don't know about it, don't really worry about it. It's not like it's a big thing, but it's a weird bug that's happening. So unless they're able to legitimately kill their target during the duration of the attack speed, and getting that 50% increased damage multiplicatively because of that aspect is going to be very good. There's also things in the Paragon board that are going to increase your attack speed, and then the minions gain 30% of your stats. And so if you're able to get your attack speed up to something like 60%, that means that they're going to get 20%, which is another 10% multiplicative. So you can get this up to like 70 to 80% increased damage because of this change, instead of just the 15% for each minion type you have active. So essentially it's going from 45% to 60 to 70%, which is nice, but it's not nearly enough to make minions viable. Going on down, the aspect of Swelling Curse is going to be really cool. We don't know if this is going to stack. If it does, that's cool. It means Bone Spirit's just going to one-hit everything in the game, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the most efficient at the activities because Bone Spirit's damage profile is just kind of wonky. The fact that it has a small AoE is not going to outdo the craziness of Bone Spear. And that's about it for that. Going on down to the other changes that are going to be really good that I really want to talk about, which is the miscellaneous changes. The big one that I really want to talk about is going to be right here, the item change jobs. So it used to be that Duriel dropping always 925 gear. This just incentivized real money trading because there was nothing in the game that would drop you all 925 gear. Like Nightmare Dungeons and AOZ didn't drop that. They were just good for glyphs and XP, so there's no reason to do them once you actually were level 100 and you had all your glyphs up. So there's no reason to do it because it wouldn't drop you gear. So the only thing that you would do to get your gear to be maxed out was Duriel. And this incentivized real money trading because people just buy the materials and then just go do Duriel farms, and the game was not fun just sitting there doing Duriel. But what they've done is they've changed it to where now all monster levels above level 144, which is tier 90 and above. So anytime you're doing a tier 90 and above, all the gear is going to drop at 925. Not just the rewards, all of the gear. And you can fill out your entire inventory in one run of a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon, which is going to mean that when you do one tier Nightmare Dungeon, that means in 3 to 4 minutes, if you're really fast at being able to do it, in 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, you're going to be able to have a full inventory. With Duriel, it took about 10 to 12 minutes to fill out your inventory, but with Nightmare Dungeons, now you're going to be able to fill it up in 5 to 6 minutes. So that means that farming for 925 gear is going to be twice as efficient doing it in Nightmare Dungeon 100s than it is in Duriel. So Duriel is going to be the way that you get Ubers, and Nightmare Dungeons are going to be the way that you get glyphs, XP, and gear, which is super good of a change. That's really, really awesome. That's about it. Honestly, that's really big. The other Necromancer change they're making is that this one fixed an issue where the two-handed was getting more than the splintering aspect 2 times scaling, which was important for snapshotting, and they still haven't fixed that. So that'll fix that a little bit. But other than that, it's not really that big of a thing because splintering isn't like woo. We don't take splintering necessarily because of the damage that it's giving the bone shards. We take it because the bone shards are now able to pierce. And the bone shards do enough damage to kill a lot of stuff. And so this is really good. And the AoE efficiency of it, we don't really use two-handers in a bone spear build either, but we do if we're snapshotting. So if you know how to snapshot, then that's what you're going to do. That's about it. Go ahead and stay tuned. There will be build guides that are going to be coming out. I have 3 in mind, a bone spirit build, and a leveling build that's going to be outputted for season 3 coming out here in the next few days. I'll be working on that tirelessly, basically putting out a video once per day to talk about those build changes and what we're going to be doing. The Seneschal, I don't necessarily know. We don't have a lot of information that's going to be going into the Seneschal changes. Yes, we have like access to them, but until we actually have our hands on them, much like vampiric powers, we're not going to really know what we're going to utilize, and so the builds are going to change. But obviously, these are kind of like the base ideas that we're going for. And so stay tuned for that. Other than that, I have nothing for you. OperatorOtter out.